Shalom, 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 shalom. All right, y'all. So we're going to wrap this up. I got a few more things I want to show you guys before I close out this doc. There's still so much I didn't touch on in this video. And I know I said this is going to be like my last video on this topic, but there's still more I got to get into. So I'm going to have to do more series on this because I just feel like there's still so much more. But we covered a lot of ground. So, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to show you guys some information here from the browser, and we are going to connect that with what we have already reviewed and what we have looked at. Now, let me just be clear, because I want to make sure that I'm being clear in some of the things that I've revealed throughout this documentary, all right? So to summarize it, these Aryan white people, these blue-eyed, blonde-haired white people, Indo-Europeans, and all the people that descend from the Europeans, okay? So if you think, as I mentioned before, you have the Visigoths, you've got the Celts, you have the Norwegian people, you have the Dutch, you have the Germanic peoples. All of these white people you see today are mostly descendants of these Indo-European groups, all right? These Indo-Europeans are said to be, well, they believe themselves to be the descendants of the gods of old, which were known as the fallen angels. And in some cultures, they call them the Anunnaki. Now, when I talk about Hyperborea and I talk about Atlantis and I talk about, you know, the hollow earth and stuff like that, I'm going to have to get into that in the next one. But these are just basic concepts to understand as we go through some of the information I'm going to show you right now. So with that out the way, let's just look at some of this information because I got a lot to show you guys. So let's just jump in. Now, to start this off, we already know that the Nephilim were giants, and they came from this unlawful union between the fallen and the children of Cain, the daughters of Cain. So the first thing I want to show you guys is this article about these pale giants, the white Anunnaki giants. Let's look at that real quick. Now, when the Bible says in Genesis 6 that these giants or these Nephilim were men of renown, it's because they were worshipped by regular people. This is Enki Speaks, all right? And it says the white Anunnaki giants preceded modern American Indians in North America. Now, I know a lot of our people, you know, think that they're indigenous to America and all that other stuff. But let me just tell you, even if, you know, there were some dark-skinned indigenous people here, the giants were here long before there were these so-called black indigenous Americans, because I just noticed that these black indigenous Americans never mention these giants. So that's something to think about. I personally believe that they migrated from North Africa and were of the Moors, because the Moors migrated to Europe. They would have migrated to America. They were seafaring people. Just something to think about. But it says white Anunnaki giants preceded modern American Indians in North America. The Anunnaki Council of Enlil, commander of the gold mining expedition from the planet Nibiru to Earth, exiled Marduk, once heir to rule Nibiru, from Egypt to North America in 8670 BCE for his attack on their forces. Marduk and his cohorts were 7 to 10 feet tall, blonde and red-haired people. Okay? So blonde, blue-eyed, red-haired giants. I've talked about this plenty of times. If you've seen, you know, the giants of the Caucasus Mountains and all that, y'all know what it is. I've said that blonde hair, blue eyes, red hair, all of this stuff is a mutation. Mostly Rh negative people, people from the fallen seed, the Nephilim seed that have the Nephilim bloodline in their blood, are often described as blue eye, blonde hair, green eyes, and look like your typical Caucasians. Thousands of so-called mound builders built pyramids, effigies, fortresses, tunnels, energy capacitating chambers, and astronomical observatories and megalithic cities, as well as more recent burial mounds for tens of thousands of inhabitants all over North America, here long before modern Indians arrived. Okay, and this is Serpent Mound right here. And I believe that this is in Ohio. And we're going to look at some of these images. I'm not going to read the whole article, but we'll just look at some of these things that we have here. So this is, I'm assuming, these writings of these giants. which we're going to talk a little bit more about. We were talking about Maria Orsic and how she was in communication with these beings. We're going to get to that a little bit later. All right, let's just keep scrolling. All right, so this is Serpent Mound Park in Ohio. All right, and listen, I know a lot of our people want to connect to America. Listen, this land is called the land of the feathered serpent for a reason. This is not our land, family, okay? I don't want to turn this into a whole, disproving America being the promised land of Yahuwah, but just in case you don't believe me, let me just show you something real quick. So this land was originally called Amaruka. Okay, and I wrote here on Facebook, Amaruka, or America, the land of the feathered serpent. And I said, and so many Israelites think this is our land, shake my head. Join me in a collective rebuke of this crusty, pagan, heathen, slave-owning, defiled land. This is Babylon, a heathenistic shred of land owned by heathens. The indigenous black peoples were heathens, okay? The black indigenous peoples were not Israelites. I keep telling people that. The Israelites were brought here by force. There was human sacrifice, pagan occult rituals, shamanism, etc. This land is not our land if you are a scattered Israelite. And Manly P. Hall, who's a 33rd degree Freemason, says Amaruka is literally translated land of the plumed serpent. This was the ancient name of the Americas. In the symbolism of the ancient priestcraft, the serpent is a universal savior. Okay, and look, you can see these are just some images that I shared. Okay, the serpent symbolism, Amaruka. Now, if you think about the serpent in scripture, in some instances, it's described as a creature with wings, or Azazel is described as, a serpent type of individual with wings in some texts. But this serpent energy is the same thing when it comes to the Kundalini, which we talked a little bit about earlier with the whole Vril society and all of that. But I just wanted to show this real quick. We're going to get back to the article, but I just want to show you the land of the feathered serpent. Yeah, bro. I don't have no allegiance to this land. This land is wicked. This land has never been holy. It's been defiled. Millions and millions and millions of black people, their blood has been spilled on this ground. Yahuwah said he would scatter us to all the heathens among the heathens, and that's exactly what I believe. We are not in the land right now. Why would all this idolatry and stuff be taking place if the land is desolate right now? All right, so Ohio Serpent Mound, template for cosmic knowledge. Yeah, that sounds like fallen angel stuff. Summer solstice sunset, summer solstice sunrise, equinox sunrises, lunar alignments. It says the Serpent Mound on the plateau of the Serpent Mound crater along Ohio Brush Creek in Adams County, Ohio, is a 1,348 foot long, 5 kilometer wide, 3 foot high stone effigy of a snake with an egg in its mouth. Okay, fertility. We talked about fertility with the eggs. That's where you get the paganism. That's where you get the Ishtar worship and Semiramis and all this other stuff, the Easter and the rabbits and all of that. A telluric geomagnetic line passes through the egg, connected with a group of ancillary mounds to the northeast, while to the northwest, the energy's path crosses a nearby field where a crop circle manifested in 2003. Now, I'm going to have to probably do a deeper study on this, but I'm seeing some evidence that could point to Cain building his city that he named after his son Enoch. Now, remember, there's 2 seed lines here. All right, there's 2 seed lines. All right, you have a righteous Enoch who was a descendant of Seth and Jared, and then you have a wicked Enoch who is a descendant of Cain. The Enoch that was descendant of Cain built a city and named it after his wicked son. It is highly believed that the Mayan civilizations could be that city of Enoch. So what does that tell you? Because if there's giants here in America, you know that there's some connections to the fallen, right? Cain was directly connected with the fallen because a lot of his people practiced the things that the fallen taught. So if you got an allegiance to this land, I need you to consider the fact that you really, really, really could be on the wrong side of history with the Most High. Just saying. All right, let's see what else we have. The Dragon at the End of Time, Heaven and Earth. I guess these are some other books this person put out. Look at it, Poverty Point, Louisiana mound. This mound features in its center an astronomical wooden calendar of wood. Why would you say wood twice? Like Stonehenge's stone calendar, Poverty Point's embankment and structures would fill the Great Pyramid of Egypt 30 times with earth. The site features a 7-foot high bird effigy. All right, I don't see anything else, so we're going to move on. Oh, look at that. Human sacrifice. A group of natives in the central highlands of Mexico capturing and putting to death a giant. Okay, look at the giant. Pale-skinned. These peoples, pale-skinned. And it's believed that these giants in America built the serpent mounds. This is a skull of one of these giants, these Nephilim. Smithsonian admits to the destruction of thousands of giant human skeletons in early 1900s. And the Smithsonian Institute, they are trying to control the narrative on, this history that we are digging up, especially about giants and Nephilim and stuff, because they're trying to, cut off us being able to identify who they are. But we know who they are. This film is proof. Look at this. A ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court has forced the Smithsonian Institution to release classified documents dating from the early 1900s, proving the organization had been involved in a historical cover-up of evidence showing giant human remains in the tens of thousands that were uncovered across America that were ordered to be destroyed by upper-level administrators to ensure protection of the mainstream chronology of human evolution in that time. Human evolution is cap. Now, we know that there were giants in the land of Canaan, but if you think that these giants were only in our area of Canaan and they weren't all around the world, when the Bible says that these giants were men of renown and they were worshipped all around the world, that tells you that they weren't just in one place. These giants would have moved all across continents. That's why if you look in Europe, you talk about the Celts, the Celtic giants, or you talk about the Gomerian giants, or you talk about some of the very, very tall whites that we were talking about were found in, America. There's remnants of giants and stories of giants all around the world. So let's not act like the giants were in just one place in the land of Canaan. All right, so we know that the Smithsonian Institute is connected to a huge cover-up. And let's look at some of these images here. These are called the gods of the old, and we're going to just look at some of these images. This is supposed to be Enki, who is like this marine deity. And a lot of white people think that they came from this character. Let me see if I can make these bigger. Okay, so Marduk, king of the earth. This is another one of these fallen Anunnaki beings, pale skin. Anunnaki, false gods. Look at that, pale skin, pale skin, pale skin, pale skin, water aquatic pale skin. Yeah. All right, we're going to keep it going. There's a lot more I got to show you, so I'm going to just try to blow through some of these so it won't take as long to go through, but I can't make any promises because we got a lot to jump into. So now, the next thing I want to show you is, do you remember how in the beginning of this documentary, I talked about this deity called Ashtar? Ashtar, and I said Ashtar sounds suspiciously like Ishtar. Well, this is one of these beings that George Van Tassel was talking about, how they came down and mated with, the upright creatures or whatever. Well, Ashtar looks like this. And this goes back to these beings I keep telling you about with these blue eyes and blonde hair. All right, this is Ashtar. Okay, and notice how he looks. Pale skinned. All right. And like I said, when you look at this, the deeper you look at this, the more you realize this is part of the strong delusion. OK, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Maria Orsic because she was said to be in contact with these beings. OK, but this is Ashtar. All right. And then if you look at his name and you replace the A with an I, you get Ishtar. Let's type in Ishtar. There we go. And this is Ishtar, who is also said to be a pale being. And you can see the wings on this one. Very, very interesting. But these are the deities that are, kind of rebranded and renamed. So you have, the Virgin Mary is used as Ishtar. You have Isis that is a representative of Ishtar. You have Semiramis that is a representative of Ishtar. All these deities are the same. They just have different names because different languages, different people groups, but still the same devil. All right, still the same devil. And Semiramis was the wife of Nimrod. All right, but I just find it very interesting that this being that these people believe in and are communicating with is named after a deity that is clearly connected to paganism. I just find that to be so interesting. But we're going to keep on going. So let's go ahead. Let's read a little bit about this Ashtar character. So it says, Ashtar, sometimes called Ashtar Sharan, is the name given to an extraterrestrial being or group of beings that a number of people claim to have channeled. Now, remember how I talked about those women that wore their hair really long, those white women from the Vril Society that were claiming to be mediums and contacting these beings from a star system? Yeah, let's keep going. UFO contactee George Van Tassel was the first to claim to receive from Ashtar a message in 1952. Now, I played a little bit of him earlier in this video, and he was the one that was talking about how they came down and they mixed with these upright creatures, so to speak, right? Creating certain types of people. Well, he also believed in this deity called Ashtar, which, like I said, is very similar to Ishtar. I don't know how that's not a red flag to anybody. All you gotta do is remove the A and replace it with an I and you got Ishtar. Anywho, after the introduction of Ashtar by Van Tassel, other mediums began to claim contact. Now, we know the Torah specifically discourages practicing necromancy, trying to contact the dead, communicating with spirits, and ancestral worship, all this other stuff that people do. And these other nations, if you into that, bro, and that's your culture and you a heathen, hey, whatever. But Yahuwah commanded us not to do this. But the reason why white people do it is because they're not the children of the Most High. They are heathens that practice heathen customs. But we are commanded not to communicate with the dead. You know why? Because you can't communicate with the dead. The people who people think they're communicating with, even these pale people, are communicating with the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. Yahuwah said that the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim would roam the earth, oppressing and terrorizing people and inhabiting people. So these ascended masters, so these so-called ascended masters, these pale Nordic ascended masters that you keep hearing about are really just these disembodied spirits masquerading as these pale beings. Interesting. Let's keep going. At one point, dozens of people were claiming contact with Ashtar and presenting conflicting messages. The most widely publicized of these messages were met with failure, and they predicted civilizations flourishing on the other planets and an imminent landing of spaceships on Earth. Okay, I don't believe in other planets, which is why I say this whole coming from some star system is just stupid. It doesn't make any sense. Now, if you want to talk about a spiritual world, if you want to talk about the spiritual world that these demons or these shadim and these angels live in, then yeah, we could talk about that. But other planets, that's goofy. Due to his common depiction as a humanoid with blonde hair and European features, Ashtar may be considered as a Nordic alien. The Ashtar movement is studied by academics as a prominent form of UFO religion. An example of religion incorporating Ashtar is the Shazek universe people, who venerate Ashtar alongside JC, this white man, and Krishna. You know why? They're the same being. Christ, Krishna, Jesus, Zeus, same beings. Among others, one of their site domains is Ashtar Sharan. Okay, all right. So I just want to give you a brief summary on this being called Ashtar, just in case you guys might have some questions from some of the stuff I touched on earlier. We're going to cover some ground with that today. So let's keep going. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is this article on alchemy. All right. And I'm not going to go through a lot of these articles as in depth because I don't want this video to be too long. So I will be kind of spearing through some of these longer articles, and some of the articles I'm going to share, will be a little bit more in depth. But I'm not going to just go through every single thing because I got so many tabs open. All right. So let's look at this about alchemy. All right. So alchemy, we talked about that in the Curse of Canaan. And I told you how this is one of the things that the fallen taught mankind was, the workings of the metals of the earth in Enoch. So alchemy, from the Arabic word alchemia, is an ancient branch of natural philosophy and philosophical and proto-scientific tradition that was historically practiced where? China, India, the Muslim world, and Europe. In its Western form, alchemy is first attested in a number of pseudepigraphal texts written in the Greco-Roman Egypt during the first few centuries. Greek-speaking alchemists often referred to their craft as the art or knowledge, and it was often characterized as mystic, sacred, or divine. Okay, so esotericism. All right. Alchemists attempted to purify, mature, and perfect certain materials. Common aims were chrysopoeia. I have no idea what this is. It says it refers to the artificial production of gold. Okay. The transmutation of base metals, example, lead, into noble metals, particularly gold, and the creation of an elixir of immortality, and the creation of panacea, which is able to cure any disease. The perfection of the human body and soul was thought to result from alchemical magnum opus. The concept of creating the Philosopher's Stone. Now, Harry Potter, which is very, very occultic, very Kabbalistic, very, very much tied to Indo-European folklore and mythology, promotes this ideal of alchemy as well. And there's actually a book and a movie called Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So I find that very, very interesting. The promotion of magic. I mean, bro, it's been in your face all the time who the children of Cain are. You just weren't able to really fully make that connection. But all praises to the Most High. The Philosopher's Stone was variously connected with all these other projects. Islamic and European alchemists developed a basic set of laboratory techniques, theories, and terms, some of which are still in use today. They did not abandon the ancient Greek philosophical idea that everything is composed of 4 elements, and they tended to guard their work in secrecy, often making use of ciphers and cryptic symbolism. In Europe, the 12th century translations of medieval Islamic works on science and rediscovery of Aristotelian philosophy gave birth to a flourishing tradition of Latin alchemy. This late medieval tradition of alchemy will go on to play a significant role in the development of early modern science, particularly chemistry and medicine. Now, I remember in school, there were classes that they were teaching on chemistry and alchemy. Well, not so much alchemy, but like chemistry for sure. So why is it that these education systems want to teach you about Greek deities? They want to teach you about titans. They want to teach you about alchemy. They want to teach you, about all this stuff that has nothing to do with the book of Yahuwah, the word of Yahuwah, I should say, Salaki. But they want to teach you everything the children of Cain taught mankind. That's crazy. But that just goes to show who's in power and who controls this system. Now, alchemy was also used during the medieval times for weapon building, and that's why a lot of times when you look at these Romans and you look at these Greeks and you look at the armor that they have and you look at the breastplates and things of that nature, they used alchemy to create these weapons of war. Matter of fact, let me pull that up, bro.
If you're fascinated by both science and magic, then alchemy is your dream come true. Let's dive into the mystical and scientific realms of this ancient quest. Alchemy, practiced in medieval Europe and Arabia, wasn't just about gold and immortality, it was the original chemistry lab. Alchemists developed distillation, crystallization, and alloying. Techniques still used today, but it wasn't all test tubes and potions. Alchemy blended science with philosophy, aiming to purify and transform not just metals, but the human spirit. Arabic alchemists like Jabir ibn Hayyan spread their knowledge to Europe, inspiring legends like Roger Bacon and Paracelsus. Though often shrouded in mystery, alchemy laid the foundation for modern scientific methods. So next time you marvel at chemistry, remember the ancient alchemists who mixed magic with science.
Okay, so let's look at this. If you look at like the Romans, the Greeks, a lot of these Indo-European peoples, because Romans and Greeks would also be descendants of these Indo-European tribes. Look at this metal on their armor. Look at the armor here. Okay, this is made with alchemy. The workings of the metals of the earth to make weapons of war. Isaiah 14, 18 through 20. It talks about the children of Lucifer and how they are experts in war. Who is that other than the white man? Okay, who is this other than the white man with all this technology, the advanced civilization? They talk about Africans don't build anything, Africans have low IQ, Africans don't know anything, they can't do anything, we civilize African people, so on and so forth. But look at all this metal. Do you know why they boast in what they know and what they've built? It's because they are the children of the fallen. The reason why they've always had a step ahead of us in so many regards is because they're the children of Cain. They are the offspring of the fallen angels, and they admit it in their own doctrine. And that's why they've always had advanced technology and weaponry and things of that nature. I mean, if you think about places that people in Africa, you know, some of the sub-Saharan tribes, not all of them, but some of them are completely, you know, cut off from society. Most of them have always been hunter-gatherers and will remain hunter-gatherers. Especially when you look at some of the indigenous peoples, like the Aboriginal Australians, or some of the indigenous people in Africa, or even the indigenous people in Brazil or in America. They are mostly hunter-gatherers. Now, if you look at some of the Bantus, the people of sub-Saharan Africa that are not, you know, what you would consider hunter-gatherers or more, you know, more tribal, they have built whole civilizations. As a matter of fact, I'm going to just show you some stuff real quick, because white people love to lie about this and say sub-Saharan Africans are stupid. And then they turn around and say that North Africa has always been white, even though we know that's not true. Let me just show you some stuff real quick.
You didn't fucking build our country. You didn't build. Some of you worked here, yeah, but you didn't build. If that was the case, then you can build your own shit in your own country. Look at Africa. How great is that built?
No, wrong.
Greatest standard of living on the planet.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Didn't even invent the wheel until the 1900s.
No, it's such a one-sided, it's unfortunate, but it's so one-sided, just a chronic lack of development and persistent underclass status and lack of contributions to mankind. I mean, certainly in the arts and in athletics, but no inventions, no philosophers, no true great masterpieces, anything like that, in terms of fine art, really. And then you have the whole planet is like this, you know? I mean, if half of Africa was super developed or halfway developed and the other half wasn't, maybe you'd have an argument, but it's whether they're socialist or capitalist, whether they got colonized or not, whether they got freed from slavery in 1800 or in 1860, or it's the same story everywhere.
Or do you think that post-welfare, LBJ, Great Society, this is what Black Americans have become, and I have a right to respond to that and say that as a white man, I don't want to live there?
Well, you know, I think it's more nature than people would like to believe. You know, there's this classic tension of, is it nature, is it nurture, is it cultural, or is it intrinsic, is it racial? And I've always been on the latter side of this among conservatives. Conservatives like to say it's all culture. Black America is the way it is because of hip-hop music and the Great Society and that kind of stuff. And I think the uncomfortable reality is a big part of it is intrinsic. You know, one of the big arguments against the abolition of slavery in the 1860s is that, you know, when Europeans colonized Africa, they hadn't discovered the wheel. There's no two-story buildings. There's no writing. There's no written language. Missionaries had to go to Africa in the last century and invent it for the African people because there's no recorded history. They didn't have writing.
So Egypt is not in Africa?
Well, Egypt is a different race. The Egyptians were not black.
Okay, but you said when they went to Africa, so I just want to...
The interior of Africa in the late 19th century. Scramble for Africa.
Okay, so we're now knocking Egypt out of Africa.
Well, Egypt is part of northern Africa, sub-Saharan Africa.
You said Africa, so I'm not trying to get a gotcha. I'm just responding. You're saying Africa.
Sure. Yeah.
It's in Africa. It's Egypt. It's kind of ridiculous to say there was no written language.
Well,
so I'm just trying to get you to
sure.
You know,
Egyptians are not Africans.
If I'm not pushing back, the internet will. So you know.
Egyptians are not racial Africans. When I say African, I'm saying sub-Saharan Africans.
Sub-Saharan, okay.
Black people because it is a different race. In sub-Saharan Africa, and Europeans did not penetrate that until the late 19th century. They didn't have any of this. To the extent that you have infrastructure in Africa, it's from the Muslims in the Sahel and the Maghreb in northern Africa, where the Arabs colonized. And then you had, you know, Carthage and Egypt. You had ancient civilizations, but sub-Saharan Africa, they didn't have that.
Now, these white people love to say that African people have not built anything. Well, this right here is Johannesburg, South Africa. built by Africans for Africans. And don't turn around and try to say, well, the Dutch people, blah, 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 blah. The Dutch people are only 7% of the population. They don't have the manpower to build something like this. But this is South Africa, Johannesburg, South Africa. This right here is Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria right here. That's what this is. And this right here is modern day Nairobi, Kenya. These are all sub-Saharan African countries. And you're telling me that black people haven't built anything? Oh my gosh. And don't even get me started on the kingdoms of Kush, because the kingdoms of Kush is what inspired Egypt to be created. And we know that Babylon is not where you think it is. Babylon is right here in South Sudan, the deserts of Sudan. You see these pyramids? Yeah. This is what once was ancient Babylon, Nimrod's Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. That's why I say, bro, the majority of the Bible, especially in the first covenant, or what the heathens call Old Testament, it mostly takes place in Africa. Our people were around African peoples, bro. And people need to understand that. But this is a remnant of the kingdom of Kush. So we have evidence of whole empires here. But see, what white people do is they turn around and say that we all lived in mud huts, which is just goofy stuff, especially when you look at the areas that I showed you. But the kingdoms of Kush, or the kingdom of Kush, was a very well-known empire run by Black, Hamitic, Cushitic peoples. Okay? So do not let these Europeans make you think that Africans are not able to build things on their own without white people getting involved, because that's foolishness, homie. That is foolishness. And anybody subscribing to Africans not having any structure and only living in mud huts and stuff like that, that's racism, period, point blank. And it just means that you were just a dumb person and you don't do any research, you don't know anything, because everything that you do know is based off of white academia and not the truth. And we know that the Garden of Eden was surrounding the land of Kush. So let's not forget that. And yes, the original Egyptians were black. And the reason why they don't want to address that or admit that is because they don't want to admit that Africans are actually capable of building societies and building whole cultures on their own without white people getting involved. That's how racist white people honestly are, in truth.
But the CT scan has one more surprise for Alejandro: Shammai's ethnicity.
Well, they have just told me that Shammai had a Nubian feature, which means that their ruling family was probably Nubian, and that was unexpected.
Wake up, nigga.
Examining Shammai's anatomy closely, the thickness of his bones and the shape of his nasal cavity, the anthropologists think he was a black African, likely from neighboring Nubia. A huge revelation that challenges the prevailing image of the Egyptian ruling class.
We always thought the ancient Egyptian elites were Mediterranean type, and in this sense, Shammai is representing the society of the frontier, in which different ethnic groups were mixed. At the end, it doesn't matter the color of your skin. Shammai was Egyptian.
But we're going to keep going because there's still more I want to show you. So we're going to keep it going, fam. Like I said, I'm blowing through some things, but I'm just trying to wrap this up because we almost at 4 hours on this doc. And, you know, by the time I get done editing, it'll probably be around that same length. So let's keep it going. All right, now, this next piece of information I'm going to show you is very, very interesting. So this is RobertSpaceIndustries.com, and this is talking about the Anunnaki. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the Anunnaki too, because I believe the Anunnaki are just another name for these fallen beings. But we're going to scroll down because there is something I noticed that I want to point out here real quick. The Hurrian and the Hittite. Now, we know that the Hittites are mentioned in scripture and they're from the fallen bloodlines. But pay attention, because I want to show you something about this other group that's mentioned with these Hittites. So it says, in the mythologies of the Hurrians and Hittites, which flourished in the mid to late 2nd millennium BC, the oldest generation of gods was believed to have been banished by the younger gods to the underworld, where they were ruled by the goddess Lawani. Hittite scribes identified these deities with the Anunnaki. In ancient Hurrian, the Anunnaki are referred to as, I don't know what this is, which means former ancient gods, or which means gods of the earth. Hittite or Hurrian treaties were often sworn by the old gods in order to ensure that the oaths would be kept. In one myth, the gods are threatened by the stone giant Ulikimi. So Ea, the later name for Enki, commands the former gods to find the weapon that was used to separate the heavens from the earth, and they find and use it to cut off Ulikimi's feet. All of the names of the Anunnaki in Hurrian and Hittite texts frequently vary. They are always 8 in number. In one Hittite ritual, the names of the old gods are listed as Adutari, the diviner, Zolki, the dream interpreter, so on and so forth. The old gods had no identifiable cult in the Hurrio-Hittite religion. Instead, the Hurrio-Hittites sought to communicate with the old gods through the ritual sacrifice of a piglet, in a pit dug in the ground. The old gods were often invoked to perform ritual purifications. Doesn't this kind of remind you of the Macedonians that came into the temple and sacrificed unclean animals, and one of those unclean animals was the filthy swine? Don't you find that very, 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 very interesting, family? I definitely find that very, very, very interesting. Now, these Hurrians were said to worship these gods. Now, we know the Hittites are from the fallen bloodline, but we know from my other films, Esau and the Horites, that these Horites were also of that fallen bloodline. Well, take a look at this real quick. I'm going to show you something here. Let's read about these Hurrians and let's get more understanding about who they actually are. The Hurrians, Romanized Huriri, also called Hari, Kurites, Huri, Kuri, or Huri, were a people who inhabited the ancient Near East during the Bronze Age, and they spoke the Hurrian language and lived through northern Syria, upper Mesopotamia, and southeastern Anatolia. The Hurrians were first documented in the city of Urkesh, where they built their first kingdom, and their largest and most influential Hurrian kingdom was Mitanni. The population of the Hittite Empire, Anatolia, included a large population of Hurrians, and there is significant Hurrian influence in Hittite mythology. Okay? Now, the state of Urartu later covered some of the same area. A related people to the Hurrians are the Uraritans. I can't even pronounce some of these weird languages. I really can't pronounce them. Now, what's interesting about these Hurrians is they are said to be the descendants of the Horites. Let me show you something about that. It says the Horites, also known as the Horim, or Karim, are an ancient people mentioned in the Bible primarily in the context of the early history of the region of Seir or Shire, which later became known as Edom. The Horites are first introduced in Genesis as the original inhabitants of the land of Seir. Before the descendants of Esau, the Edomites took possession of the territory. Now, let's just scroll down here because it gives us a little bit more information. It says the Horites are often associated with the Hurrians, a group known from ancient Near Eastern texts. Although the exact relationship between the two is a matter of scholarly debate, the Horites are depicted as people dwelling in the mountainous regions of Seir, which suggests a lifestyle adapted to the rugged terrain. They're mentioned in the genealogies and historical narratives of Genesis and Deuteronomy, indicates their significance in the ancestral history of the Edomites. The displacement of the Horites by the Edomites is consistent with the biblical theme of land inheritance and the unfolding of Aluah's covenantal promises. The Edomites, as descendants of Esau, were given the land of Seir as their possession, paralleling the Israelites' inheritance of Canaan. So these Hurrians are said to be the actual descendants of these Horites, okay? Which I find to be so interesting. And they are also a Indo-European peoples. Now, the Celts, they are these red-haired people that you see nowadays. So when you think about the Irish or these gingers or these redheads, that's why when our people are like, oh, the gingers are black, that's some goofy stuff. Red hair is definitely a fallen angel trait. The fallen, or not the fallen angels, but the Nephilim. The Nephilim were said to have red hair and pale skin, blue eyes, blonde hair, and all this other stuff. So I need black people to stop being so fascinated with these Europeans and these mutants features that they have, like recessive genes and, you know, pale skin, colored eyes, straight hair, blonde hair, red hair. All that stuff is a mutation. And if you happen to be a black ginger, that's no fault of yours. It just means there was probably some intermixing somewhere in your family and you inherited that recessive gene. But let's look at these Celtic people here. So these Celtic people are also of the Indo-European branch of peoples, and they are also said to be connected to the giants. Now, the interesting thing about the Celtic people is they're also, like I said, if you think about the Irish people, the Scottish people, all of them are descendants of the Celts who came from these Indo-European peoples, who are also, anybody who's Indo-European would be considered essentially Aryan, essentially. So let me show you something real quick. So the Celt people are also connected to Stonehenge. These Celtic people are these druids. These people right here that you see with the white garments on and they're gathered around this Stonehenge is because, like I said, these white people, their history and their culture is paganism. They worship multiple deities. That's why when you think about the Nordic people, they worship several different Nordic deities, plenty of them. But this is the druidic priestly class of these pagan religions. And if you look at the Canaanites in the scriptures, these white Indo-European people, they practice the same animals, a human sacrifice of unclean animals, like the pig, for example. They do a lot of worshiping of nature and many of these other things. But these are the Celts, and you can see these are the druidic priestly section of these people. And look, you can see this pagan moon right here, Babylonian, obviously. All right, now the reason why I'm showing you about the Celts is because we're going to talk a little bit more about the Celts. Now, the Celts have also been said to also have a very high Rh negative percentage amongst them, the Basque people, and then the Berbers. But we'll get to the Berbers and the Basque a little bit later on. But let's read this. It says Celtic ancient origins, decoding the bloodlines of the Anunnaki gods. Let's read this. Because like I said, this Rh negative blood, it comes from these Nephilim. It comes from the fallen. It created a genetic mutation resulting in pale-skinned beings and also a corruption of the DNA of blood. All right, let's look at this. So land of the gods, you can see Caucasus Mountains right here. You can see this pale being right here. And then this other being, which is half bird, half human, which some of these deities are also worshipped in ancient Egypt, which is why I believe a lot of the gods of Egypt and, you know, some of the pagans that worshipped, you know, these different deities like Yahweh or, you know, the goddesses or the gods of you know, Babylon and Canaan and all that. These were all just Nephilim beings that were known as the men of renown, is who these people were worshiping, not Yahuwah. But it says, from the captivating pages of Keeper of the Celtic Secrets, unveiling the astonishing truth, ancient ETs and their profound impact. We're going to skip that. Now, this article seems to be using a lot of Robert Seifer's information, and I'm going to just tell you about Robert Seifer. He's a white man who is you know, very much kind of pushed this idea of white supremacy and Aryans, you know, being special and all this other stuff, but we know that they're really just fallen bloodlines. All right, we know that for a fact. So when I see his information, I have to chew up the meat and spit out the bones. But I did use some of his information because a lot of his books, a lot of his information proves that these people come from the fallen, these so-called white people. The origins of life, the Caucasian races, descendants of the Anunnaki, bask in the legacy of the Elohim Godhead. And guess what? Ancient Israelites. Now, this right here is hilarious because basically this is why I know this is, let me come on the screen real quick. This is how I know they don't know what they're talking about, these white people. He's saying that Rh negative blood was present in Adam, and the Adamic people are all Rh negative, and the Israelites were white and also Rh negative, while at the same time he's claiming that the ancient Israelites also came from Atlantis. Like, stop it, dude. There weren't even no Israelites back then. There wasn't even no Shem at that time, nor was there a Japheth, nor was there a Ham that went on the ark. Everything he's talking about happened pre-flood. Their timelines are all messed up, which is why I know they don't know what the hell they're talking about. But this is what I call pseudoscience. White European pseudoscience, not based in facts, not based in evidence, based in lies, based on this myth of white supremacy. But let's keep looking at this real quick here. They're more than history. They're the lineage of the Elohim royal family. Yeah, right, bro. Okay, just like the royal family says that they're royalty, but they come from the dang fallen bloodline. So just keep that in mind. All right, so let's read this. I'm gonna just scroll past some of this because I really don't care about what he's talking about. All right, we'll start here. Prepare to embark on an expedition of ancient wisdom, a saga that bridges time and cultures and illuminates the unbreakable thread that weaves through the tapestry of humanity. Open your heart and mind to the origins of Earth's diverse children as we uncover the riveting tales etched in the storybook of existence. The Adams, so now it's more than one Adam. I mean, there's Adam and then there's his descendants. And when I say Adamic people, I am not talking about people who came through Cain's seed, because they were not considered Adamic. The only people who are Adamic is all the descendants that descended from Seth. Everybody who came from Seth would be considered Adamic. Anyone who did not come from Seth is not Adamic. Okay? Okay. So now there's more than one Adam here. Had lighter skin tones compared to the hybrids known as the woman called Eve. Wait, huh? Dude, this doesn't make any sense, bro. So when you really challenge white people, you're going to realize a lot of what they say is just foolishness. And it's not based in biblical scripture. They just use the scripture to try to push a narrative because they don't expect people to call them out on foolishness. So they just push all these lies out here, and you're supposed to not question it because they're white. Anyway, the Adams and Eves. So now you have more than one Adam and more than one Eve, or Kua. Listen to this. The Adams and Eves naturally possess Rh negative positive blood. Wait, what? Bro, you either have Rh negative or you have Rh positive. So you're saying there's Rh negative positive blood. So now there's, bro, oh my gosh. I'm so confused. And I literally just started this article. But anyway, which connects them to the earth, unveiling the first woman meet the original Eve, the primal hybrid woman hailed as the mother of Africa's black-skinned populace, rooted in the fusion of Adam's DNA and Neanderthal essence. She bears a unique genetic makeup, 1/4 Anunnaki, a testament to her celestial origins. Although her hue may be less intense than the earliest Homo sapiens, the black-skin legacy remains an undeniable part of her essence. Her bloodline carries a profound purpose, safeguarding the survival of Earth's natural-born beings on the brink of vanishing. Salaki. The tapestry of all black-skinned African races finds its origin in Eve. The Nephilim enigma. Once reigning over Hebrew, the Nephilim, a race cast from the celestial realm, found a new home on Earth. Now, the reason why I'm reading this to you guys is because I want you to understand the white supremacist narrative of the fallen. They believe that these fallen beings were Adamic, and that they came from the stars, and they literally were not born of the women that laid with these fallen Malachim. They didn't come from another place. Those fallen angels came down upon these women and raped them, who we can identify as the daughters of Cain. All right, let's see. The Nephilim race cast from the celestial realm found a home on Earth, known as the fallen giants. They etched their legacy across biblical passages. Notice it says fallen giants and not fallen angels. Interesting. They etched their legacy across biblical passages. In St. John Family Chronicles, the Nephilim emerges as the forebears of the Mongoloid and Asiatic communities. Their origins marked by enigmatic type B, Rh negative blood, a code distinct from our planet's E, the emissaries of the divine. So this is another piece of information proving that these white people believe that Rh negative blood is divine. It is the blood of the gods, when it's the blood of the fallen. It is the proof of the first sin of these fallen Malachim and what they did that made Yahuwah so angry. So you have to be able to see through the lies of white supremacy when you are approaching these different types of articles, which is why I'm explaining it to you so it will make sense. Let's keep it going. The Elohim royal godhood, bearers of an illustrious lineage that extends to the 13 tribes of Israel. Now there's 13 tribes of Israel? Homie, what is going on with these white people, cuz? A family intertwined with El and Enki's bloodline. This legacy encompasses the multitudes of Hebrew people, false. The white race, transcending Celtic, Irish, Scottish, Welsh, and Anglo-Saxon ancestry. Within their veins flows a narrative that unravels through time, unifying faithful Jews and many Western white races alike. All right, let's read this last part. We'll move on. The genetics of this group are likely identical to F below, as both groups are descended from the Anunnaki race. However, E signifies divine leadership, specifically the ruling royal family, okay? The divine right to rule. The original blood type of these descendants was Rh negative, which means it originated outside of Earth. Today's science does not have an explanation for the origin of the Rh negative factor. However, according to ancient beliefs, it is believed to trace back to the divine Elohim family godhead. The members of this royal godhead were forbidden to marry and have children with individuals of different blood types. That's not in scripture. Okay, so we're gonna move on. I really don't want to read this, dude, because just seeing white people claiming to be Yasharal is just so annoying. And the lies, man, the lies. Let's keep going, y'all. All right, so this next article is from Project Avalon Forum, and we're going to just read what this person wrote about this white supremacist, Rh negative bloodline. We came from the gods type of ideal. So it says, this is an excerpt from the book, Keeper of the Celtic Secrets, which we just read a little bit about in the previous tab. Finally, from the Keeper of the Celtic Secrets, not all about the origins of the major races who call the earth home is being shared with others. You must keep open mind, stay out of your cave now, or you won't be able to grasp the wisdom being presented here. Yeah, go back to them caves. Just leave us all alone and go back to them caves. Yes, there really were ETs. Who do you think provided the wisdom to build the pyramids? Give us mathematical equations, science, and astronomy. That fully aligns with Enoch. Fully aligns with Enoch and what the fallen taught man, or at least the descendants of Cain. Are you ready for some real wisdom? Okay, good. Caucasoid, or the white races, descend from the Anunnaki, including the Elohim Godhead. And yes, the ancient Israelites are actually descendants of the Elohim royal family. Another one of those lies. African or Negroid, the black races, descend from the evolved Homo sapiens and the hybrid created Adams. They are the Eves. This is so stupid, man. I mean, the fact that people actually believe this is just crazy to me. Let's keep it going. The original evolved creature of Earth, first known as Homo erectus, who evolved to Homo sapiens, i.e. the Neanderthal. Eventually, this species became extinct due to the Ice Age, the Great Flood, famines, diseases, natural disasters, etc. This race was black skinned with coarse black hair, large features, and type an O Rh positive blood. So they're basically trying to say, and this is what I'm noticing about white people, a lot of them are trying to say that the Neanderthals and the hominids were actually where Negroes came from. Even though you don't really see too many depictions of actual black Neanderthals. You really, really don't. You don't see black people that are Neanderthals that dwelled in caves and were eating bloody meat. You don't see stuff like that. That is only typical with Caucasians. The Aryan colonies from Atlantis, all right? More evidence that these white people came from these fallen beings. And I'm just going to read this part right here. It says, there is reason to believe that these Celts were originally part of the population and empire of Atlantis. We are told, Reese's British Encyclopedia, that the Titans, that Mercury, one of the Atlantean gods, was placed as ruler over the Celti and became their great divinity. F. Pezron, in his Antiquity of the Celti, makes out that the Celti were the same as the Titans. Giants. Now, I'm not going to be able to get deep into the Titans in this particular documentary, but the next documentary that I do in this topic, we're going to talk about these Titans, these gods of old, and I'm going to call it the blood of the gods. All right, so we'll do another video for this, a documentary for this. It just won't be today because it's too deep of a topic. Same as the Titans, the giant race who rebelled in Atlantis, and their princes were the same with the giants of scripture. He adds that the word Titan is perfect Celtic and comes from Tit, the earth, and Tin ordained man. And hence the Greeks very properly also claimed them, I don't know what that is, or earthborn. And it will be remembered that Plato uses the same phrase when he speaks of the race into which Poseidon intermarried as the earthborn primeval men of that country. The Greeks, who are Aryans, trace their descent from the people who were destroyed by the flood, as did other races, clearly Aryan. Let me say that again. The Greeks, Aryans. The Romans, Aryans. All of these so-called white people of today go back to these Indo-European peoples, okay? So all our oppressors, even in scripture, when you think about the people who, you know, the Macedonians or the Romans or the Iranians or the Persians, or if you think about even the Greeks, they were all Indo-European peoples, the pale-skinned ones at least. We know the original Romans were black and all that. Original people of Europe were black, but there's just some lies that you got to understand about that. The Greeks, who are Aryans, trace their descent from the people who were destroyed by the flood, as did other races clearly Aryan. The nations who are comprehended under the common appellation of Indo-European, says Max Mueller, the Hindos, the Persians, the Celts, the Germans, Romans, Greeks, and Slavs do not only share the same words and the same grammar, slightly modified in each country, but they seem to have likewise preserved a mass of popular traditions which had grown up before they left their country home. Okay, so this is just more confirmation of what I've been showing you about these Indo-Europeans and being connected to the fallen. But we're gonna keep it moving. Let's go. Now, speaking about the blood of the so-called gods, let me show you this next thing here. So this is from an article entitled rhnegativeregistry.com. I've used this in Esau and the Horites, and I've used this in other documentaries proving that Rh negative blood comes from these fallen beings, abominations. All right. It says theory, Blood of the Gods by Mabel Royce. Are you Rh negative blood type? If so, you could be descendant of the ancient astronauts themselves. About a year and a half ago, my sister Bonnie and I were discussing some of the unusual characteristics of our family. Let's get to it. Bonnie had a problem with infants and hemolytic disease. She has zero negative blood, or O negative. Okay, O negative. Now, the thing about O blood is it can be positive or negative. You have the positive blood types A, B, O, and AB positive, and then you have Rh negative. So you have A negative, B negative, and O negative. O can, like I said, it can be positive or it can be negative. It is very much, you know, it depends on who your parents are and what's in your genealogy and all that. But anyway, she has written a book including this problem called The Dew by Venus Thaddeus. One of the questions was asked, what does this hemolytic disease occur? Why, along with the Rh negative blood, does our family have such a high IQ? High IQ. Okay, I showed you the video earlier about that white man talking about black people have low IQ. And like I said, when it comes to Rh negative blood, black people, it's not very prevalent in the black community. And the only reason it is now is because of slavery, is because of intermixing, and because of all these different things, which is why I keep telling y'all, stop mixing. You may not think so, but you could be mixing with the Nephilim bloodline and you won't even know it. Just make sure the person you marry and the person you want to have children with is not Rh, because there will be complications if the woman, even if she's an Israelite and she's Rh negative blood, she's going to have to take a shot to be able to even save your child. So just keep that in mind. All right. I think it's important to know, you know, who you are laying with and who you are marrying and making sure y'all are compatible, because people who have Rh negative blood are not compatible with people who have Rh positive blood, which is the majority of the people in this world. Okay. Why so many have psychic experiences? We talked about this. We talked about people with Rh negative blood tend to have a lot of psychic experiences. Some of them are gifted mediums. I won't say gifted because that's not a gift, but they call themselves gifted mediums. They're able to see things that are not there. They're able to, you know, travel, astral travel by will. They have all these like spiritual abilities that normal people do not have. It also says that they were completely not able to get the COVID, and they're not able to get HIV either. But then they also say that a lot of them have been abducted. They've had experiences with demons. They've had experiences with spirits. Okay? See, the children of the fallen, or these Nephilim descendants, their people who are these fallen beings are trying to get in contact with them, which is why they have these experiences. And they do track people with Rh negative blood. That's another thing to understand. Why this urge to ask why? Why the early maturing or the large head and eyes? Large head and eyes, that is another thing that is connected to the fallen or the Nephilim. Why have we always felt we are different from other people and so many other things to set us apart? We were raised in the church, but we never received answers to the questions we asked. Why doesn't anyone else ask these same questions? We are not satisfied with the answer just because. Are there others out there who ask the same questions? Then we heard about the possibility of the ancient astronauts, and the pieces started to fall into place. Now, these ancient astronauts I'm talking about are these fallen beings, okay? Just so you can understand that a little bit more, because, you know, they got a lot of different words they use to describe this, and you got to understand that when you're looking at this information, okay? All right, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. Let's read about the Basque people, because I'm going to get into the Basque people and the Berbers in just a second. It says, the Basque people of Spain and France, who I've talked about, and Esau and the Horites, have the highest percentage of Rh negative blood. About 30% have Rh negative, and about 60% carry one R negative gene. The average among most people is only about 15% Rh negative, while some groups have very little. The Oriental Jews of Israel, Oriental, huh? Yeah. Also have a high percent Rh negative, although most other Orient people have only 1% Rh negative. The Samaritans and the Black Koshin Jew also have a high percentage of Rh negative blood, although again, the Rh negative blood is rare among most Black people. As I said, is very rare. Now, this is also why Neanderthal DNA is not found in African people. You know why? Because Rh negative blood is a Neanderthal gene. It is connected to the Neanderthals. Like the Horites, for example. Just keep that in mind. All right, let's look at this next article. This is from infinityexplorers.com. The race of the gods, part of humanity, is not from this world. Rh negative. In the book, The Race of the Gods, Nick Redfern raises a revolutionary theory about a small part of humanity, and it is that this part could well be the product of an advanced extraterrestrial civilization, children of Cain. As Redfern comments, within the human race, there are 4 primary blood types. They are A, B, and O. The classifications are derived from the antigens of a person's blood cells. All right, we already know all this. Most of the human population has these proteins in their cells. The percentage of Rh positive blood in people on Earth is very high. Like I said, most people are Rh positive.
Which were of old men of renown. So there's only one line in the Bible, 1 or 2 lines in the Bible. But if you look in the book of Enoch, it goes into much more detail. There's no mistaking what they're trying to say in the book of Enoch. That angels came down and had sex with women and produced offspring. Now the Bible only talks about one type of offspring, the Nephilim, who were giants, but according to the book of Enoch, there were different types of offspring who were just as different. So these are the fallen angels that wandered down to Mount Hermon. The interesting thing about Mount Hermon is that when Paris was the prime meridian, Mount Hermon was 33 degrees north and 33 degrees east. So those numbers are kind of significant to certain people. So one type of the offspring were Nephilim, but as I said, there were others. But the point is that the human genetic code was corrupted. So let's look at the traits of the Nephilim. Shouldn't do that. Don't do that. Okay. Yeah, so I'm just going to go through them very quickly. Giantism, 6 fingers and toes, 2 rows of teeth, extra body hair, extra vertebrae, a tail, and there's a big one, lack of melanin in the skin, blue or green eyes, red or blonde hair, Rh negative blood. And I know there's a couple of people who've got Rh negative blood in here. And a certain type of intelligence and wickedness, psychopathy. These things were introduced into mankind. so I'm going to go through them. Giantism is still around. Okay, well, it's kind of masked. I was actually looking for giants on Google Images, and interestingly, even though in America the basketball players are huge, some of them are over 7 foot, none of them came up when I was looking for giants. So, you know, we've been conditioned to accept people of amazing height as maybe a little bit of an oddity, but and also that when we look in the Guinness Book of Records, we'll see actually very disabled people who are giants, who, you know, aren't physically very strong, but literally we have giants walking the earth today who are anatomically, you know, correct and you know, strong, powerful people. There's that guy there. He's huge. If you see him in the ring, he's a boxer. You see him in the ring against a normal-sized boxer, it's just like, you know, it's David and Goliath. The first generation of the Nephilim were actually 450 foot tall, according to the Book of Remembrance, the Bible. But it might sound incredible they got to that height, but when you look at the parallels in other cultures, like the Greeks, they talk about the Titans. Anybody seen the film Clash of the Titans? Yeah? Well, there's a sequence in there where you see 450-foot giants fighting. It's telling you that, you know, this story basically has moved across different cultures, but these things existed at one time. And as they mixed with humanity, they got smaller and smaller. 6 fingers and toes. This again is actually more common than you can imagine. This is a whole family with that genetic trait. Halle Berry has 6 toes. Don't know if anybody knew that. So does Oprah. There are many more people that you can imagine have this thing. And when you look at, for instance, the Native American culture, you know, you used to hearing about the Indians that go how, you know, but they never said how, but they always used to hold their hands up just to see, are you human? Are you one of us? Also with nature, the Rh negative blood, when you mix Rh positive blood and negative blood, it starts to curdle, okay, because they're incompatible, and I'll go into that in a little while, but they're incompatible. So when the Native Americans or Aboriginal Americans used to do the blood brothers thing, where they cut their hand and mix their blood, they were actually checking to see if they had the same type of blood. More than one row of teeth. Again, this happens as well. It turns out that the human body is actually perfect, but what we have is an infiltration of a different bloodline, which causes genetic mutations. The human body does not mutate naturally. Any mutation is caused by this foreign DNA in the human genome. Extra body hair. There are a lot of people that you see walking around that look quite normal, but like this guy here, is shaved down to his neck, round his collar. You know, if they took their shirt off, there'd be Yetis underneath. Yeah. Again, this is another thing that's more common than most people realise. Extra vertebrae and a tail. Again, this happens again more often than people realise. In this country and the Western countries, when a baby's born with a tail, it's whipped off very, very quickly. Nobody even gets to hear about it. But there are other cultures where they don't immediately cut it off, or sometimes they don't even bother with it at all. But it's one of those things that still crops up these days, because just like in the days of Noah, right, we're all corrupted by this DNA. We're all corrupted by it. It's become all pervasive. And sorry to say this in the room full of white faces here, white skin isn't natural to this earth. And I'm not trying to say it to be horrible or anything, but it's how does it make sense that you can be out in the sun and not be tolerant of it? The sun gives this world life. It's literally a different DNA has pervaded this world, and this DNA does not belong here. And as I said, we're all, in one respect or another, we're all corrupted by it. I've got not much to say about blue or green eyes. The blue or green are eyes that don't have melanin, just like skin not having melanin. If their eyes are blue or green, it's showing a lack of melanin. Blue is the greatest lack. Green, slightly less, and then hazel is has slightly more. So with me, I've got excess body hair and I've got green eyes. So most of us in this world are corrupted by this DNA. Rh negative blood. Now this is a bit of a smoking gun, really, because Rh negative blood is blood with a lack of a certain protein on the red blood cells. Okay, only 15% of the human population are lacking in this protein. But interestingly, it's only 15% of the human population. All other animals have this protein coating on their blood, and it's incompatible with the rest of humanity. When a Rh negative woman conceives of an Rh positive man, the woman's antibodies will attack the baby as a foreign object. Yeah? The baby will have difficulty surviving unless they're given a shot which suppresses the mother's immune system. Yeah? So it's telling you right there that this blood type, which is, has everybody heard of Rh negative blood?
Yeah, well,
audience part.
It's not entirely true. I know an Rh negative and positive couple who didn't have that problem.
Right. Well, what usually happens these days is that the first baby, right, makes it through, but then the mother's immune system becomes sensitized to it, and then the second one. Sorry.
She had 3 children.
Well, you know what? You can't with people. You can't say everybody is like this. You'll get exceptions along the way, but generally, this is what happens. You get a long time ago. It was the first baby will be attacked, yeah. But then as people got used to it, it's more like the second baby, and maybe some people never have it. But generally, you can only speak in general terms when you're talking about humans. Yeah. Where was I? Oh yeah. Well, scientists don't know where this mutation came from. They've got no idea where it came from. It doesn't, there's no way it can appear naturally, because, as I say, it doesn't appear naturally in any species on this earth. And as I said, it's incompatible with the rest of the human species. It's also got a high copper content, which gives it a slightly blue tinge, which is where the term blue bloods came from, because the royal families are Rh negative. We found that out when Prince Charles gave blood back in the 80s. He was Rh negative. So yeah, that's where the term came from, because in the past it was the royalty who had the Rh negative blood types, and yeah, they derive their divine right to rule because they have the blood of the gods. They don't tell you which gods, though. Cunning and wickedness. As I said, this is about a bloodline. Yeah, skin color, and race are a distraction. This is about a bloodline, and it's only one bloodline that controls all the corporations in this world. Yeah, it's only one bloodline that controls the banks. It's only one bloodline that's responsible for all the misery that's perpetrated on this earth. It's a wicked bloodline, yeah, and it hates humans. It hates all of us. Okay. So, this is the parallel. You know how the elite like to rub stuff in our noses and rub out, stuff in our faces, like what they're doing and what's happened. Well, I believe the story of Alien is what's happened on this earth. Yeah, that alien. The only way it could sort of I don't know the word I'm looking for. The only way it could procreate is to impregnate humans. Okay, and I don't know if anyone saw the very last Alien film with Sigourney Weaver in it, but the alien in that film actually started looking human. It was human shaped and had a slightly human skeletal face, but that's the point. It was mixing with humans and it became more and more human-like. Okay, and when you look back into the fossil record, you find there are these creatures that look vaguely human, but they have these massive skulls. And I'd suggest that these ones were the only ones that survived, but earlier ones would have had a much longer head, just like the alien. So in Genesis 6:12, it says that essentially that these things had corrupted everyone apart from one family, and literally there was evil all over the earth, and these things were running wild. And by the way, there are a lot of people who say that the Old Testament is a bloodthirsty book with a bloodthirsty God who wants to kill everybody, men, women, and children. And yes, absolutely. But imagine this: if you were to find a whole village full of those aliens from Alien, yeah, would you hesitate to kill every last, male, female, and egg? Would you? Really? Audience participation. See, the point that's missed in the Bible is that the things that the Israelites were told to go in and utterly destroy were not humans. Yeah, they were sort of, precursors to what we are now. There were these hybrids that looked vaguely human but were utterly evil, that would kill and eat humans. So Noah was the only Noah's family were the only ones who weren't corrupted by this. But it says in the book of Jasher that a week before the flood, Noah had to go out and find wives for his 3 sons. But the only wives that were available were corrupted ones. So this DNA survived the flood through the offspring of the union of the Noah's children and these corrupted wives. So these are the 3 sons of Noah, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. So the serpent seed survives. Amongst Ham's children were the Canaanites, the Raphites, the Amalekites, and all the ites in the Bible who are described as giants, as 6-fingered giants. Okay, so Ham's line was corrupted. In Japheth's line, there was at least one giant. He was called Gog, and but in Shem's line, there were no giants. There were no genetic deformations or genetic anomalies. So his line was the blessed line. His line was the human line. That's what the Bible is telling us.
It says, within the United States, current estimates suggest that about 85% of all Caucasians, about 90% of African Americans, and about 98% of Asian Americans are Rh positive. Okay? So it says Asian Americans have 98% Rh positive blood. So-called black people, Negroes, have 90% Rh positive blood, and only 85% of Caucasians have Rh positive blood, meaning that Caucasians have the highest percentage of Rh negative blood. That tells you everything. A small percentage of the U.S. population and the rest of the world, too, it should be noted, that do not display the relevant proteins fall into a very different category than that of Rh negative. In Spain, okay, we read about the Basque people. If we today, and particularly those of Rh negative blood, are the product of alien manipulation, then who exactly were the beings who decided to play God with the first forms of the human race? Why were they so determined to create? Why were they so determined to create radically new and different kinds of people? And where do they come from, and are they still with us? There are questions that lead us to legendary and powerful body of entities that have been known as the Anunnaki. More proof. There are also questions that take us to the heart of ancient Sumerian cultures, which can be found in what is now southern Iraq, which, according to historians and archaeologists, were first established sometime between 5500 and 4000 BC. According to Sumerian tradition, more than 400,000 years before a great flood devastated the earth and killed millions of people, this powerful race of legendary people came to our planet from the skies above, the fallen angels, y'all. Do you see how all these stories correlate? They all correlate because there's truth to it, but of course they got to throw in the lies. We really only have the word of Yahuwah to be able to know the truth behind all these lies, because how the Sumerians present it is different than how the Egyptians present it. How the Egyptians present it is different than how the Mayans present it. How the Mayans present it is different than how these Indo-Europeans presented, or the Nordic people, or the Scandinavian people, or the Slavs, or all these other European peoples. Let's keep it going. Notice you got the alien right here and you got the Neanderthal. During their time here, they brought some sort of stability and even society to what was originally extremely primitive human tribes, some of what eventually became the Cro-Magnons. However, that was not the original agenda of the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki's main goal was to genetically alter primitive humans to create a robust and strong entity that effectively amounted to nothing less than a slave race. Okay, we talked a little bit about them wanting to enslave us, and that's what I'm talking about when I say there's a people on this earth who only live to do this. It's getting so interesting, bro. We're going to keep it going. I'm not going to spend too much time on this article, though. All right, so let's finish reading this article here. The Rh negative strain runs through the British royal family, something that has prompted controversial claims that the royals are not all they appear to be. There is a whole subculture that suggests that this royal family is directly descended from an ancient order of human extraterrestrials who are the true secret rulers of our planet. Is there something in the genetic makeup of the Rh negative that makes them born leaders, powerful figures, and perhaps not very different from the legendary heroes of old, gods of old, and men of renown as described in the pages of the Bible? If one day a small percentage of the human race is shown to be not fully human after all, will we see a backlash against Rh negatives? Will there be witch hunts? I mean, I don't think so. I just think it just reveals some things. Like me personally, I don't have anything against Rh negative people if you are Rh negative. I just realized that this is something Yahuwah didn't make or put in people. All right, so continuing on, the next thing I'm going to show you is a couple passages from a book that I shared some passages from earlier in regards to Atlantis. And this is the book Atlantis, the Antediluvian World by Ignatius Donnelly. And I'm going to just quote something from his book. And let's go ahead and jump over to that real quick. And I'm going to show you what he said about the Celts. The Britons, he tells us, form a strong contrast to the people around them who are the Celts, of tall stature, with blue eyes, white skins, and blonde hair. They are communicative, impetuous, versatile, and they pass rapidly from courage to despair. The Britons are entirely different. They are taciturn, hold strongly to their ideas and usages, are preserving and melancholic, in a word, both in moral and physique. They present the type of a southern race of the Atlanteans. By Atlanteans, Dr. Bodachin refers to the inhabitants of the Barbary states that being one of the names by which they were known to the Greeks and Romans. He adds, the Atlanteans among the ancients passed for the favorite children of Neptune, a deity. They made known the worship of this god to the other nations, to the Egyptians, for example. In other words, the Atlanteans were the first known navigators. Like all navigators, they must have planted colonies at a distance. The Bretons, in our opinion, sprung from one of them. Neptune was Poseidon, according to Plato, founder of Atlantis. I could multiply proofs of the close relationship between the people of the Bronze Age of Europe and the ancient inhabitants of Northern Africa, which should be read remembering the connecting ridge, which according to the deep sea soundings united Africa and Atlantis. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Africa, Northern Africa, because I played you guys a little bit of a clip of Nick Fuentes earlier when he was talking about we're low IQ and we didn't build anything and we have no written languages and the Northern Africans are a different race, and all of that is not true. Now, we know darn well that the ancient Egyptians were black. We know that for a fact. That's easy to prove. Take a look. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up these Africans or these North Africans is because I need you to understand that there are people who are there now who are not African. They are white people in Africa. All right? So let me show you real quick what I'm talking about. First, I'm going to show you these Berbers. The Berbers of North Africa. They are found in places like Morocco and the Canary Islands and things of that nature. You think of North Africa, a lot of them are in Egypt now, and these North African countries. Who are these people? These Berbers, okay? Now, these Berber tribes are very similar to the Basque people. They have the highest rate of Rh negative blood in Africa, these white people here, okay? And you can see these tattoos on their face. They're very strange looking people. You know what I'm saying? Obviously very pale. Now, there's no way under the dome you can tell me these people are indigenous to Africa. That's foolishness. That is foolishness. But these are the Berber tribes, okay? Now, what's interesting about these Berbers, though, is they actually stole the identity of these people, these Afro-Berbers. Now, I'm going to be real with you. I do not believe these Afro-Berbers to actually be our people, even though they look Negroid. I believe they're probably of Hamitic tribes. You know, when you think about the people that came from Ham, some of those tribes would be found in those North African peoples, including the original Black Berbers. And these are called the Amazigh people. Okay, but these are the actual original Berbers. But these white Berbers came in and they basically stole their culture, and now they're masquerading as the original Berbers. But look at them. They just look demonic. I don't know, man. I don't know. These are just, I don't know, man. It's just something about them is just off to me. But these Berbers are said to be descendants of Atlantis. And what I'm trying to hint at here is that it's very, very possible that these descendants of the fallen intermix, as I've been saying for a while, with these Hamitic tribes and these Japhetic tribes, which is why you got these now, okay? I'm gonna show you some more of these Berbers real quick, and I'm gonna show you some more of these Afro-Berbers so you can see them. And these are some of the more, well, indigenous ones you can see right here. This woman is clearly African, right? Obviously. All right. So these are the Berber tribes. Now, I'm going to show you some of these Afro-Berbers real quick so you can see that they clearly stole the culture of these peoples. Now, like I said, these people look Negro, but they are not Negro. They are a different people than we are. Their culture is different than us. You can't always look at skin color when it comes to black. You just can't, bro. There are many, if black people are indigenous to this earth and the Adamic people, you need to understand not everybody is of us just because they look like us. You're going to know what people they come from by their culture. All right? Essentially, like in places like Africa, you got to look at their culture. But these are the Berbers, the black Berbers, okay? And you can see these are some of these black Arabs, so descendants of Ishmael. And I talked about Ishmael. I've said how Yasha Ma'al was mixed in with some of these fallen bloodlines too. These are more of these black Berbers here. Okay? They very much look Negro. And I'm gonna be honest with you. I personally believe that a lot of these, well, actually, I think these are Berbers. It says Sahelians, but it could be, they could be Sahelians. I personally believe these Black indigenous Native Americans or indigenous Americans are descendants of these Northern Africans, which are these people here. If you look at their hair, they wear it the exact same way. Some of their outfits are very similar to Native Americans. And I'm all like, our people think that these are our people, and they're not. But anywho, here's some more of them. This one, she looks more Ethiopian. Okay? So you can definitely tell she's African. Okay? Let's look at some more. Trying to find more of these Afro Berbers. This right here, this dude looks like he's definitely probably a descendant of the ancient Egyptians. The Somalians, the Ethiopians. You can kind of tell in the facial features and even the hair. This is an Egyptian hairstyle right here. This hairstyle specifically is found in ancient Egypt. So I would say he's most likely a descendant of the ancient Egyptians. Or the Somalians. Because the Somalians, the Ethiopians, some of the Cushites are all basically descendants of the Egyptians. And you can see these are some Berbers right here. Look at the braids. Okay? So I need you to understand, I've talked about African hairstyles, Afrocentric hairstyles all throughout scripture. All right? Our people would have had braids, but some of the Hamites also would have had these hairstyles too, because it's very, very similar. The hair texture is very similar. You feel me? Look at that. Now you would look at this person, you think, oh, that's a Negro. Oh, they from the tribe of Yahuda. Let's keep going. I think this woman is also Berber. I could be wrong about that, but maybe not. Maybe not a Berber. Because I just typed in Berber, but it's giving me some other suggestions that are not tied to that. So I could be wrong about that. Okay. All right. So I showed you the Berbers. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you guys the Basque people. Okay, because the Basque people and the Berbers have a high percentage of Rh negative blood. I've shown you the Basque before, but I'm gonna just show you again. These are the Basque people. Like I said, they are pale, they have light eyes, blue eyes, green eyes, blonde hair. You feel what I'm saying? Red hair. And they have the highest rate of Rh negative blood. Look at that. Now, if you look at her, she doesn't look any different than the Berbers, the white Berbers that I showed you just a second ago. Which tells me personally, they probably come from the same people. And I believe that because of the Rh negative blood, but we'll get to that in a second. All right, so these are the Basque people here. Okay, so you see the Basque. All right, just keep this, let me show you this one. This one right here is Basque. All right, and you can see the Basque flag right here. Blue eyes, green eyes, hazel eyes, blonde hair. Now I'm going to show you another image of them, and I'm going to show you the Berbers again, just so you can see what I'm talking about. Now, I want you to lock this heathen woman in your mind for a second, okay? And I'm about to show you something else, so you can see the similarities. So you look at that woman, and then I show you one of these Berber white women, and you can't tell me that there's much of a difference in how they look, because there really isn't. All right, so you see that image in your mind, right? And now I'm going to jump over here to this lady. Look at that. There's not much of a difference, is there? There really, really, really honestly is not much of a difference between these people. They look the same. They look the same. So you have two peoples, the Basque in Europe and the white Berbers in North Africa, that have this high rate of Rh negative blood. Now, I'm going to take you somewhere with that. Check this out. All right, so this right here is going to be the Basque Studies College of Liberal Arts in Nevada. All right, and they do studies on these Basque people. Okay, and I just want to point out something here. It's like a little visitor center. You can go here and learn about these Basque people. And the reason why they study them is because they know their bloodline is different than Rh positive people, and they're studying this Rh negative. So if you go under here, it tells you a little bit about these people. I'm going to just read this little brief factor, but I want to talk about the language and stuff in a second. So let's just read this. Who are the Basques? The Basques are people who live in a small region about the size of Rhode Island that straddles the border of Spain and France from the sea in the west into the Pyrenees in the east. This area is called Euskal Herria. I can't even pronounce that. Araba Bazakaya. I don't even know how to spell it or say it. Basques speak a language called Euskara, but today only about 25% of the population is fluent in that tongue. Even so, the word for a Basque person, Euskaldun, means possessor of the Basque language. The Basque population is distinguished physically by a high incidence of Rh negative factor in the blood. Now, let's read about where they come from. Listen to this. No one knows exactly where the Basques came from. Some say they live in that area since Cro-Magnon man first roamed Europe. Estimates of how long they have lived there vary from 10,000 to 75,000 years. Some say they are descendants from the original Iberians. More fanciful theories exist as well. One is that the Basques are the descendants of the survivors of Atlantis. And we're going to talk a little bit more about North Africa in a minute, because there's just more you got to understand about North Africa, especially the Canary Islands. All right, so we'll get to that a little bit later on. I don't want to get too ahead of myself here, and I want to make sure we're doing everything on point here. Where does the Basque language come from? Just as no one is sure about the origins of the Basques themselves, linguists are not in agreement over the origins of the Euskara, the Basque language. Either in Basque, the word Euskara is not capitalized, but even when using it in English, it is customary to capitalize it, just as we capitalize the names of other languages. Although there are theories, none of them have proved beyond a doubt that Basque is related to other languages, such as the Georgian family of languages in the Caucasus, or the Berber language family of Africa, or even the Quechua language of Latin America. So far, the only thing most experts agree on is that Euskara is in a language family by itself that is not related to any other language in the world. It is therefore not an Indo-European language, the large group to which English, French, Spanish, and Russia belong. All right, so we can see that this language is different. These people are different. Very, very interesting. Let's keep going. All right, so this next article is from the Alabama. This next article is from the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and this is talking about these hate symbols of these white supremacist groups, because a lot of them are tied to the occult, and a lot of people don't know that. And I'm going to just kind of break down a few things here. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but because that honestly requires a video of its own. So this is the Black Sun. It says the Sonnerad or Black Sun has long been a symbol of the neo-Nazi movement. While the symbol originates from an ancient Norse representation of the sun, or the Black Sun, more modern context shows us how the Sonnerad was a symbol of Hitler's SS. And after the fall of the Nazis in Germany, a symbol of the remaining Nazi supporters. Many symbols include the swastika have been appropriated from ancient cultures in order to encourage dangerous racist narratives. So that's the Black Sun. And then you have the Valnat, which is also tied to these Nordic peoples. All right. A white nationalist group named the Detroit Right Wings claimed and altered the logo of the Detroit Red Wings. The logo contains a Nazi SS symbol, the Sonnerad, imprinted on shields and shirts. The Valnat, or Knot of Slain, is an ancient Norse symbol used to represent the underworld. Tartarus, where the angels are chained down. This symbol has also been appropriated by white supremacists. These groups use the Valnat to demonstrate a connection to ancient Nordic culture, and in some cases to represent their willingness to die in battle for Odin, a Norse god. This one's interesting. The 666, or the so-called AOK symbol, it really means white power, which is why the Proud Boys throw up this symbol all the time. See, you thought it had something to do with the devil or the AOK sign, but what if I told you it was a combination of both? It has to do with the devil, and it also is saying that the devil is AOK, and they are in allegiance with the devil, which is why they have a lot of black people throwing this up in the industry. But it is a white power symbol. And you know, some of these symbols can have dual meanings and people might think it don't mean anything, but I do. The okay hand gesture was once an innocent gesture used in general society as a gesture to mean okay or a-okay. I disagree about being innocent. It always has been connected to 666. But anyway, incorporated in American Sign Language and utilized in Hindu and Buddhism as a symbol of inner perfection. However, started in 2017, the symbol started being used to represent white power. It is flashed in social media posts and videos, most infamously used by Brenton Tarrant. Tarrant flashed the symbol in courtroom in 2019 after being arrested for murdering 50 people at mosque in New Zealand. Wow. The Iron Cross. I mean, the cross itself is pagan. You wonder why these Europeans love the cross so much? It goes back to ancient Egypt, which is the Ankh, which is another cross. The Messiah was not hung from a cross, he was hung from a tree, but yeah. Acts 5:30, Acts 10:39, 1 Peter 2:24. The Iron Cross was a German military medal that has centuries of history. However, the Nazi regime claimed the medal and utilized it, placing a swastika within the metal of the cross, thereby making it a Nazi symbol. After World War II, the Iron Cross was primarily discontinued. However, white supremacists and alt-right groups and neo-Nazis have continued to use the Iron Cross as a symbol for their racist beliefs. Yep. All right, now let me see if I can show y'all some more of these symbols here. So we're going to jump over. All right, this is the black sun symbolism. I'm sure you guys have seen these symbols before, but this is the black sun symbolism that is oftentimes used by white supremacists and people who believe in this Aryan race and the superior race. A lot of these white supremacists and these alt-right people, they use this symbolism. A lot of white supremacists in prison and stuff like that, the Aryan Brotherhood, they all have this tattooed. A lot of them, not all, but a lot of them have this tattooed. And if they don't have this tattooed, they've got other symbols that are tied to the occult. Let's read about this. The black sun is a type of sun wheel symbol originating in Nazi Germany and later employed by neo-Nazis and other far-right individuals and groups. The symbol's design consists of 6 radio SS logos. It first appeared the SS. Now, this is lightning. Now, remember, it says that I beheld Lucifer fall like lightning from heaven. And they're using the lightning symbolism. I mean, what do you think Zeus is? The god of lightning and thunder? Come on, man. These people are the devil. Wake up. It first appeared in the Nazi Germany as a design element in a castle at Wewelsburg, remodeled and expanded by the head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, which he intended to be a center for the SS. The symbol appeared nowhere else in Nazi Germany. Yeah. And this black sun is also representative of the Vril, which is that invisible force that, you know, they like to channel and use, or they believe they have access to. When you look at the Tibetan Buddhists and the monks and, you know, the Kundalini serpent spirit and all of that other stuff, it all ties back to the Vril energy. So Vril is not a good thing. Black people, don't you mess with that stuff. Let these heathens do what heathens do. We follow Yahuwah. Let's keep it going. All right, so I already showed you about the SS symbol, which is essentially the double lightning right here. Okay. And I'll just read a little bit of a... that summary's kind of, I don't really want to read that. Okay, let's keep going. The Celtic cross is another one. We talked about the Celts. All right, now this is also interesting because this is also the zodiac symbol or the crosshair symbol. Let's read a little bit about this. The Celtic cross is a form of a ring cross, a Christian cross, featuring a nimbus or a ring that emerged in the British Isles and Western Europe in the early Middle Ages. It became widespread through its use in the high crosses erected, and these are the high crosses right here. You've seen these before. Erected across the British Isles, especially in regions evangelized by Scottish missionaries from the 9th through the 12th centuries. So it's basically just another pagan cross. I mean, for lack of a better word, that's essentially what it is. There is another alchemy, operative and practical, which teaches how to make the noble metals and colors and many other things better and more abundantly by art than they are made in nature. H.P. Lovecraft says, midsummer, when the alchemy of nature transmutes the sylvan landscape to one vivid and almost homogeneous mass of green, when the senses are well nigh intoxicated with the surging seas of moist verdure and the subtly indefinable odors of the soil and the vegetation. In such surroundings, the mind loses its perspective, time and space, became trivial and unreal, and echoes of a forgotten prehistoric past beat insistently upon the enthralled consciousness. The Marriage of the Sun and the Moon, and this is written by Manly P. Hall, who is a very well-known 33rd degree Freemason. Alchemy is the union of the sun and the moon. This takes place in man when the heart and mind are joined in eternal union. It occurs when the positive and negative poles within are united, and from that union is made the philosopher's stone. Paracelsus says alchemy is the art that separates what is useful from what is not by transforming it in its ultimate matter and essence. And Henry Wadsworth Longfellow says, ah me, what wonder-working occult science can come from the ashes in our hearts, once more the rose of youth restore? What craft of alchemy can bid defiance to time and change, and for a single hour renew this phantom flower? Let's keep going. All right, so I got a few more things I'm going to share with y'all, and then we will close this down. I still have much more I can share, but we're going to just save that for the next documentary that I do on this topic. So I'm going to just share a few more articles with y'all, and then we going to be done here, because I feel like this has been long enough. So let's get to it. Atlantis. Were the Atlanteans human? The civilization of Atlantis has been described as being so spiritually and technologically advanced that it is natural to wonder if there were humans or something greater. While they were certainly fallible beings, several theories suggest their DNA originated from beyond just planet Earth. In this article, we shall discuss in more detail some of the main theories that answer the question, were the Atlanteans human? The Atlanteans were not purely human. They were one of the first hybrid races combining human and otherworldly DNA. Atlanteans were created when gods or extraterrestrials came to Earth and mated with humans. The Atlanteans migrated to Egypt, and Atlantean DNA continues to exist in modern humans. Okay, so again, there is a held belief that these Atlanteans, these white people, are not human. They are descendants of fallen beings that mated with the women of the earth, creating hybrid races. So-called Caucasian of today. Yeah, man. Some say the Atlanteans were half human, half god. The theory that the Atlanteans were half human, half god is primarily rooted in Greek mythology and the writing that Plato shared about Atlantis. He theorized that the very first Atlanteans were the children of God, Poseidon, and a human woman named Cleito. You can read more about Poseidon. Were the children of God, Poseidon, and a human woman named Cleito. When we consider the Atlanteans as being half human and half god, it makes sense as to how these beings excelled in the ways that Plato described, and why as humans today, we can feel both a deep connection to this planet, but also something divine and esoteric that is much larger within our consciousness in everything we create. The Atlanteans as half human, half star beings. Another more contemporary theory is that the Atlanteans were half human and half extraterrestrial, which stems from interpretations of various creation mythologies. It also supported by information gained through the channeling of clairvoyants, mediums, okay, who have access to knowledge and communication in non-linear time and space, what is known as assessing the Akashic record, as well as past life recollection. The Atlanteans were half human beings. Some say these chosen humans originated from the Middle East, and the extraterrestrials that came to Earth at the time were the giant Anunnaki beings. The humans and Anunnaki combined to form the Atlanteans, but the story does have a bit more complexity, which we will discuss in the next section, which I'm not going to read. Why were the Atlanteans created? There are a few theories on why this hybrid race was created. The Atlanteans may have been an intergalactic experiment to see if this sort of genetic mix was viable. This mixing of DNA may have been initiated to expand or preserve the genetics and the knowledge of the Anunnaki star beings on Earth. Some say that at the time their original home planet was dying, and the best way for their bloodline to survive on Earth was by combining genetics with humans who are already well adapted and adaptable to Earth. This alternative history also has a dark side, as the Anunnaki on Earth were divided between loving humans and loving their half-human children, and controlling and treating humans and offspring as slave labor to procure the minerals that they needed for their survival. Much like the white people come to Africa and steal the cobalt and the uranium and the gold and the diamonds and want them to work and not pay them, and they just continue to colonize Africa. It seems to me like the children of the fallen are just like the children of Cain and have the same wicked intentions as these fallen angels. Even though the survival of pure blood Anunnaki was limited on planet Earth, the Atlanteans originated as they were a protected group of human Anunnaki offspring that were intentionally guided to embody the knowledge within their blood that was both human and star being. This is why and how the Atlanteans and the city of Atlantis became such a spiritually and materially advanced civilization in its prime. All right, yo. Now I have one more thing I want to show you that's going to lead me into the next documentary that I do about this. And I have some other stuff I'm going to be working on, so it'll be a while before I bring out the next documentary in this series. But I want to talk about the North Africa Berbers and these Basque people a little bit more in the next documentary and the giants that they came from, so it can make a little bit more sense. But let me just show you something real quick here. All right, so I'm going to share this last article talking a little bit about the Canary Islands. And like I said, I'll have to get deeper into it. I will not have time in this documentary to get deep into it, but just keep your eyes peeled, because I'm definitely going to do a video on these white North Africans and these Berbers and these Basque and these mysterious people. You know what I'm saying? Because there's so much more to them that you got to understand. But I'm going to just read you a little bit of this article that I have about this. All right. So the Gaunches of the Canary Islands Atlantean giants. And just in case, you know, people might ask me, well, Yekcir, where was Atlantis? Let me just pull up a map real quick. Now, the thing about Atlantis is there are conflicting accounts about where this ancient civilization once was. But one thing everybody that believes in this civilization can agree on is that it was destroyed by a flood, which totally lines up with the Bible, by the way. So it was destroyed by a flood, but it was an advanced civilization that was basically around during the pre-flood world or the antediluvian world. And it is believed that Atlantis is off the coast of Africa somewhere. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So if you look at this map right here, this is Africa, and you can see Atlantis right there, which is connected to the Canary Islands. So if I were to be real with you and honest with you, I personally believe these Berber tribes and these Basque people, some of them might have migrated into Europe from Atlantis, and some of them migrated into North Africa. Now, this is kind of an older map, so it looks a little different than what you might think of, but it's believed that Atlantis is off the coast of Africa, which is right here. And there's the Canary Islands, and this area of Atlantis, they believe, has sunk completely, you know, in the water. Now, like I said, there are conflicting accounts about Atlantis, like where it actually is. You know, some white people don't even like to admit it was anywhere near Africa. But there's a lot of evidence that it was. But it was destroyed by Yahuwah because of all the wickedness that was taking place. Okay, it was destroyed by a flood, the Great Deluge. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you guys this article real quick, and then we're going to close it out. All right, so the Gaunches of the Canary Islands, the Atlantean giants. Who were the Gaunches? The Gaunches were the first known inhabitants of the Canary Islands. It is believed that this group of indigenous people came to the region during the first millennium BC, but as archaeologists uncovered evidence of this culture, it was not their artifacts or their ruins which first struck them. It was the size of the people. Now, These people, these particular Ganj people or Ganch people are pale people or very, very tall people, which could link them to the Denisovans, which were very, very, very tall, kind of, hominid looking kind of creatures. You know what I'm saying? But let's keep reading. The Ganches were apparently extremely tall for the time, especially the height of the male members of the race was typically between the range of 5 feet 9 inches and 6 feet 2 inches. That's really not that tall. For real. Some of them had blue eyes and blonde hair along with rosy skin. In addition to their unique appearance, they were broad and solidly built, and they would have been extremely strong and quick at their feet. And this is an image of it right here. And this is in the Canary Islands of North Africa. North Africa, in the Canary Islands, you will find these statues of these white gods, men of renown. And look at that. He's European looking. Bro, it's so in your face, bro. I don't know why people reject this truth, bro. I just don't understand. It says, statue of Tegeste, a Ganchi leader on the island. You saw it coming. Those tall, aloof islanders of the Atlantic are other contender for Atlantis, although, as with all speculation, this is largely guesswork based on a few similarities. However, there's another intriguing link to mythology, this time Greek. There is some evidence which links these islands to the Isles of the Blessed. The Isles of the Blessed. Yeah, right. All right. All right, we're going to stop there because there's just so much. This is such a deeper topic, and I just don't have the time to get into it.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget you can support this channel by Cash App, $Malkiyah Music. Also be sure to check out the Patreon for uncensored documentaries, films, deep dives, and much more content that you won't find here on YouTube. Check out the merch store for the latest trip. And let me not forget to say, if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that like button and tap in with us. All praises to the Most High, Yahuwah, the highest. Shalom.